Europe did not fall asleep. It was caught off guard. An army from the east was coming, not knights, not kings, not crusaders. Something else. If you want real history, not fairy tales, subscribe to the channel now. This story only gets darker from here. Let's slow this down. Imagine Europe in the early 1200s. Castles are everywhere. Knights are clad in shining armor. Kings are fighting other kings. It's a world of constant conflict, but the wars are brutal in a way that's familiar. Everyone knows the rules. Everyone understands how war works. You have your heavy cavalry, your infantry, your sieges. Battles are fought, won, and lost according to a certain logic. And then, news starts to arrive from the east. It starts as whispers, then turns into panicked reports. Cities erased from the map. Massive armies destroyed in a matter of days. Entire regions are going completely silent. No one in Europe truly understands what is coming. Because this enemy, this force of nature, does not fight like Europeans. They don't fight wars for territory or honor. They hunt civilizations. So, who were the Mongols, really? Forget the image of a chaotic, disorganized horde. That's a myth. The Mongols were not chaos. They were organized destruction on a scale the world had never seen. Think of them as a finely tuned machine of conquest. Every single warrior was a mounted archer, a master of both the horse and the bow. Every unit, from a squad of 10 to an army of 10,000, moved like a single coordinated body. Every campaign was meticulously planned months, sometimes years in advance, with a vast network of spies providing intelligence. Their strategy was revolutionary. They didn't conquer land first. They systematically destroyed all resistance first. Fear was not a byproduct of their warfare. It was a primary weapon. Speed was a weapon. Information was a weapon. And the fragmented, squabbling kingdoms of Europe had none of these advantages. They were about to face a storm they couldn't even comprehend. Before a single European soldier ever laid eyes on a Mongol warrior, they saw the devastating results. Reports from the Kievan Ruses and other eastern territories were terrifying. Cities that had stood for centuries were burned to the ground. Armies that were considered invincible simply disappeared. The few refugees who managed to escape told stories that sounded impossible, like something from a nightmare. They spoke of horsemen who seemed to live in the saddle, who never tired. They described arrows falling from the sky like a relentless, deadly rain. They told of armies that would pretend to retreat, luring their enemies into a chase, only to turn and envelop them from all sides. The European commanders, confident in their own military traditions, laughed at these stories. They dismissed them as exaggerations, the panicked tales of defeated people. No army can move that fast, they declared. No men can fight for days without rest and proper supply lines. They were catastrophically wrong. Their entire understanding of warfare was about to be shattered. When the Mongols finally reached the borders of what was then considered Europe, they did not announce their arrival with a grand declaration of war. They tested the waters. They sent small, incredibly fast units on lightning raids. These weren't invasions, they were probes, designed to gather information and sow confusion. They would strike a town, vanish, then reappear 50 miles away the next day. European forces, confident in their heavy armor and superior numbers, would give chase. And they would die. The Mongols would lead them into ambushes, tire them out, and pick them apart from a distance with their powerful composite bows. This wasn't an invasion yet. This was reconnaissance by massacre. This is how Mongol warfare broke European logic. European warfare at the time was rigid, almost ritualistic. It was defined by the head-on charge of heavy cavalry, the clash of infantry lines holding their ground, and decisive battles that were often over in a matter of hours. The Mongols ignored all of this. They refused to engage in a direct, head-on fight unless the odds were overwhelmingly in their favor. Instead, they attacked the soft targets, supply lines, baggage trains, and foraging parties. They would appear, strike, and vanish before a proper response could be mounted. They used feigned retreats to lure disciplined European armies into breaking formation, turning their strength into a weakness. They would exhaust their enemies, mentally and physically, for days. Then, and only then, when their opponents were tired, disorganized, and demoralized, would the Mongols close in for the final annihilating blow. Entire European armies collapsed without ever landing a proper hit on the main Mongol force. The numbers reported by chroniclers of the time are staggering, and they shocked the commanders who heard them. At the Battle of the Kalka River, a combined force of Russ's princes, numbering in the tens of thousands, was utterly destroyed by a Mongol force they outnumbered. European reports from the invasion of Poland and Hungary speak of 20,000 soldiers being destroyed by forces half their size. Fortified castles, which should have held out for months under siege, were surrendering without a fight, sometimes in days. Armies were fleeing before contact was even made. This wasn't because the European soldiers were cowards, it was because they had no answer. You cannot charge what you cannot catch. You cannot fight an enemy who refuses to fight by your rules. And then there was the psychological war, a Mongol specialty. They almost always left a few survivors. This wasn't an act of mercy. It was a calculated strategy. Those survivors, terrified and broken, would flee to the next city, the next kingdom, and spread stories of absolute terror. They described the speed, the brutality, the sheer inevitability of the Mongol advance. Terror spread faster than any messenger could ride. Europe didn't just fear defeat, Europe began to fear extinction. By the time the rulers of Europe, the kings and the Holy Roman Emperor, finally understood the true nature of the threat, it was already inside their world. But their response was slow and fragmented. Kings argued over who should lead. Allies delayed sending troops, hoping the storm would pass them by. Armies were mobilized slowly, encumbered by their heavy equipment and long supply trains. The Mongols did not wait. They moved with a speed that defied belief. What Europe didn't know yet was this: the real battles had not even begun. The raids and skirmishes were just the opening act. Entire kingdoms would soon stand in formation on the field of battle, believing their numbers, their faith, and their heavy plate armor would save them. They were wrong, because in the next episode, Europe finally meets the main Mongol armies in open battle at Liegnitz and Mohi, and what happens next shocks the medieval world to its very core. Episode 2 drops soon. Subscribe, or you will miss the moment Europe nearly breaks.